Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Microjourneys. Thank you for being here with me today. It means a lot. My name is Liam Sturgess. I'm a musician, a singer-songwriter, a writer/editor. All the fun things I used to say at the beginning of the Rounding the Earth podcast. I'm saying them again here today. Well, let's jump right into it. Microjourneys is a show where we take a quick break from our own life's journey to consider alternative stories, to consider what other people might be going through, or to look at topics in a way that perhaps we haven't before. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been having a lot of fun going into a bit of an educational journey for myself, a micro journey into the topic of digital identity and vaccine passports. And my friend Gabe has been there for, I think, all of the episodes, saying hello to Gabe in the chat. And the response has been absolutely wonderful. My last article/video combination that I did, I had a couple people tell me it was the best piece I'd ever done, which is crazy nice. So today, what was supposed to be just a singular investigation into New York's Excelsior Pass has turned into a 4-part series, which we will be ending today. So let's jump right in, ladies and gentlemen. But before we do, if you can, I highly recommend you support the show. If you're watching on Rumble, you can leave a Rumble rant. It's like a paid comment, and I get 100% of the money that you send through there. And also on Substack, liamsturgess.substack.com. The best way to support me in the continuation of my independent work is to become a paid subscriber to that. But enough plugs for now. Let's dive in, ladies and gentlemen, to today's show. Identity is yours, and yours alone. Let's do this. So, where did I hide my little presentation? There it is. So, today's going to be a bit of a philosophical journey, just as much as it is an educational one. But let me tell you a story. On August 10th, 2015, Dr. Alicia Carmona published a blog post on her LinkedIn profile titled Digital Identity for All, Seeking Your Feedback. Carmona explained that she had recently started working with a new nonprofit initiative called Identity 2020, which seeks to develop tools that provide identity solutions specifically for social impact. The new venture was to be more formally launched and articulated in the very near future, and in anticipation of this, Carmona wanted to reach out to her networks to see if her colleagues could provide her examples out of their field, institutional or personal experiences, where identification/identity is at the core of a community problem. Now, based on her writing, Carmona comes across as someone who has spent years of her life working to improve the lives of others. She elaborates on the underlying source of her concern in the opening paragraphs of her post, and I will read that for you now. I quote, Those of us who work with immigrant populations are very aware of the ways in which people can be disadvantaged, victimized, and otherwise made vulnerable by a lack of some official form of identification. Being stopped by the police is a classic problem faced by the undocumented in the US. Even those immigrants who are eligible to regularize their status are often stymied by a lack of documentation due to cost, poor infrastructure, bureaucracy, corruption, and various other inefficiencies. Insufficient identification makes it hard for them to open a bank account, obtain credit, rent a home, or buy a car. There are other examples globally, such as stateless populations where a lack of official documentation blocks people's access to education, healthcare, and the ability to move freely. There are trafficked children who lack the identification that could prove their age or provenance, making it even more difficult to extract from them exploitive situations. Sick. Now, her background, insofar as her LinkedIn profile is honest, supports her premise. She worked on a Freedom Forum sponsored project that examined the relationship between the media and economic trends in the 1990s, and taught classes on Latino family and gender at Lehman College in 2009. From 2011 on, Carmona worked as an independent consultant for clients such as Catholic Charities of New York, Deutsche Bank's Anchoring Achievement in Mexican Communities initiative, Sesame Workshop, and the New York Academy of Medicine through Summit Research Associates NYC, and the Office of the Superintendent of the Catholic Schools in the Archdiocese of New York. It is presumably in this range of positions that Carmona worked front and center with refugees and others facing problems related to lack of official identification. Now, Carmona received feedback as requested. Specifically, her LinkedIn post received 17 likes and 4 comments. Karen Woolman, for example, provided examples of how such a solution would not be limited to just aiding the undocumented, citing her own experience acquiring a New York City ID card, benefits from which included arts and drugstore discounts. Now, of course, it didn't quite work, and Alicia points out it actually has to work as intended to be effective, doesn't it? So obviously, it's so hard to achieve in practice. In any case, John Phillips also largely applauded Carmona's initiative, but noted that ID 2020's global program objectives may be impeded because, quote, not all countries follow UN rules. Rather than this centralized top-down option run by the United Nations, Phillips offered the example of the decentralized Sovereign Foundation. Not to worry, though. NGOs can play a huge role in getting people with no shareable identity their first identity. Now, I took a look at the Sovereign Foundation, and among the organizations who partnered with Sovereign between 2016 and today are ATB Financial, which is, interestingly enough, a crown corporation owned by the province of Alberta, and apparently it is the only such state-owned bank in Canada. You also have Cisco, Hyperledger, IBM, iRespond, which is an international non-profit organization dedicated to solving the identity problem using a unique digital biometric identity solution. Then you have Orgbook BC, a digital credentials network for businesses run by the government of British Columbia. And that's a whole rabbit hole that I had no time to go down. But let's just say the province of British Columbia is way, way more on board with the digital ID concept than I could possibly have guessed. And of course, also Perkins Coie, which, for those who don't know, is a large international law firm that was sanctioned last year in relation to their financial dealings with the Democratic National Committee as part of the larger so-called Russiagate situation, where they contributed to a certain set of false narratives about a former president of the United States and the country of Russia, which I fell hook, line, and sinker for. But anybody who has read my previous article will know that I'm not surprised one bit to see that IBM has made an appearance yet again behind yet another digital identity venture. But it goes even further. In fact, they played a significant role in Sovereign at the time of Phillips' comment, acting as a founding steward, as they're called, and a member of Sovereign's technical governance board. The tech giant also co-led a joint research project with Sovereign and the Alberta government-owned ATB Financial titled Job Creds, which explored the use of verifiable credentials in online authentication and authorization services. A review of Sovereign's annual reports, if we're cutting right to it, reveals that the foundation went on to partner with the World Economic Forum, the World Bank Group's Identity for Development Initiative, or ID4D, and the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, to help achieve its mission and better define identification systems for global populations in need. But not all respondents were quite as enthusiastic about the ID 2020 approach. Perhaps sensing what the project would inevitably become, as we're going to get to, Charles Moore offered that, in his view, only a bring your own identity setup could work. As he says, it requires no centralist entity, replacing the need for governments in a fully decentralized solution. And the required infrastructure is already deployed. Charles also linked to an article of his that he wrote titled, "Your Identity is Yours and Yours Alone," in which he elaborates on the fundamental problem with this notion of identity as it's being discussed. I quote, "Modern society has muddled this concept of identity. Today, nations, corporations conflate driver's licenses, Medicare cards, and other state-issued identity attributes or credentials with identity. This is problematic because it suggests a person can lose one's very identity if a state revokes one's credentials, or even if one just crosses nation-state borders." Very apt, Charles. But despite this cautionary tone, Moore goes on to advocate for yet another digital identity solution, for better or worse. In this case, he suggests devices certified at a certain level by the FIDO Alliance. Now, the FIDO Alliance, or the Fast Identity Online Alliance, is an American nonprofit organization focused on developing and improving security protocols to reduce the over-reliance on passwords. According to an article published on Stitch, I quote, "In 2009, PayPal discussed its proposal for using biometrics as an alternative way to authenticate users instead of using passwords. These conversations inspired a new industry standard for passwordless access using public key cryptography and local logging technologies. In 2012, the FIDO Alliance was formed." Well, PayPal, biometrics, sounds like a fantastically safe alternative to the other suggestions that have been made so far. That was sarcasm. And by the way, I just want to point out, based on various comments that have been left on YouTube and otherwise, I think the title MasterCard, How MasterCard Saved Africa, perhaps this is an example of why sarcasm is not a go-to for me. In any case, in the chat, Gabe notes, "This is why I have mixed feelings about passkeys. It can be a direct upgrade, but I'm not in love with the attestation bits in the spec." I'd love to hash that out with you more, Gabe. That's very interesting. So, all right, but this FIDO Alliance, maybe it's not what I initially suspected to be. Well, let's take a look. Who are some of the members of the FIDO Alliance? Oh, well, let's see. You've got the Alibaba Group, Amazon, American Express, Apple, Bank of America, Binance, which is in the process of being sued right now by the US government, the Cabinet Office of the UK government, Chase Bank, Cisco, Down. Down, of course, is the maker of Verifly, which was the airport system that hooked up with the Excelsior Pass, if you recall. Also, the Digital Transformation Agency of the Australian government, Goldman Sachs, Google, HSBC, Huawei, IBM, Intel, the Israel National Cyber Directorate, MasterCard, Meta, Microsoft, Mozilla, as in Firefox, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which played a big role in the official report of what happened with the Twin Towers on 9/11, PayPal, of course, Salesforce, Samsung, Target, TikTok, Trust Stamp, Twitter, Vanguard, Verizon, Wells Fargo, and Yahoo. Ugh. So yes, all of the digital identity solutions presented in response to Dr. Carmona's LinkedIn post are led or predominantly supported by the same corporate giants and renegade government agencies from whom we everyday citizens are attempting to protect our privacy and sovereignty from, including a few from countries who are ostensibly our cyber enemies, like China, like Huawei. Okay, let's turn back though to the real topic at hand here. Alicia Carmona's baby, ID 2020. So this is the earliest archived version, at least on the Wayback Machine, of ID 2020's website from September 8th, 2015. It features a different logo and was at this point still officially called Identity 2020 Systems, instead of the shorter name that it would later exclusively adopt. In addition to Angela Carmona, who was working as operational lead, the initial team also included Dr. Patrick Deegan, developer of the Open Mustard Seed platform. I do not know what that is. And Kathleen Moriarty, a partner at the law firm K. Scholler. Now, K. Scholler was featured as a partner of ID 2020 alongside Broadhaven Capital Partners and Red Rose. Now, I found this interesting. The portfolio of Broadhaven's venture capital arm, Broadhaven Ventures, includes a number of notable consumer technology and cryptocurrency companies, such as Boost VC, which is itself a venture capital firm invested in Colossal Biosciences, a biotech company seeking to quite literally resurrect the woolly mammoth, under the leadership of George Church, who, if you recall from our previous video, was funded by one Jeffrey Epstein. You also have CoinList, Disk Holdings, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. You also have Etherscan, which is where you go to verify transactions on the Ethereum blockchain. You have Filecoin, Lending Club, which is also a portfolio company of Plug and Play. You have Lyft, the Near protocol, which was heavily invested in by Sam Bankman-Fried's Alameda Research. Polychain Capital, which is another venture capital firm and is an investor in the BBS network, which hosts a joint message board for the Global COVID Summit, and the Decentralized Medical Network, or DMED, which are both projects of Roundtable Media. I hope Matthew Crawford is watching. That is a group of individuals and networks that we colloquially refer to as the Puerto Rico Gang. Then you have the Chernin Group, or TCG, whose own portfolio includes, COVID-19 test kit maker Everlywell. You have Medium and its competitor Substack, NFT marketplace OpenSea, music companies So Far Sounds and SoundCloud, Tumblr, Twitter, and Yahoo. Okay. So very interesting. These are threads from prior research ventures of mine. Now, Red Rose, on the other hand, is much more of an enigma. The button on the logo of Red Rose from the archived ID 2020 page leads to this very strange looking website, which disappears from the web within less than a year. ID 2020, in attempting to try to figure out what's going on, I discovered that ID 2020 is listed on Coinbase as being a sub-organization of Red Rose Group, also called Red Rose Ventures, Red Rose Technology Industries, or RRVIG. According to its own Crunchbase profile, RRVIG is the holding company of a set of synergistic digital economy operating companies with a focus on innovation in financial technology, blockchain, and digital identity. Another sub-organization alongside ID 2020 is Expense Circle, which, quote from its LinkedIn profile, delivers systems to reduce friction and operating cost by increase transparency in expense management. Yes, by increase transparency. So I want to note and suggest you note as well whenever there are instances of this sort of strange, almost broken English or rather lazy typing, because I noticed it a number of times in this thread. But I say it delivers systems. Well, I should say it did, given that it has also been largely, strangely, wiped off the internet. That's another common thread that I found. But let's find what the true common thread here is. What ID 2020 and Red Rose have in common is their listed founder, a gentleman named John Edge. He's on the far left here on the board and advisors section of the ID 2020 website archived from 2015. Now, oh, and just by the way, while we're on this page, the gentleman beside him, Dr. Gavin Wood, as far as I understand it, is a co-founder of Ethereum and authored the white paper on Ethereum. And further to the right there, Mercedes Fernandez. When I found her a little later, she was named Mercedes Fernandez Edge, which I believe suggests that her and John got married. Now, according to John's LinkedIn profile, he studied at the University of Leeds from 1993 to 97, where he focused on, of all things, biomedical engineering and the research of machine systems to replace damaged physiologies. Very interesting, if anyone would like to hazard a guess as to what that means. But I do note again that biomedical, that's supposed to be one word, but it's separated into two. So once again, just feels like a bit of lazy English. He then held a series of rather similarly named positions across a variety of financial services companies, including CLSA from 1998 to 2000, UBS Investment Bank from 2000 to 2002, Lehman Brothers from 2002 to 2005, Portware from 2005 to 2006, and eventually winding up at JP Morgan Chase from 2008 to 2012. Now, while he was there, he claims to have co-invented a patent to detect insider trading, although his name does not appear on the patent itself. It appears attached to his LinkedIn profile. The patent was originally assigned to a company called Red Kite Financial Markets, which, as we'll see, Edge co-founded in 2008. It was then reassigned to Fortent, a financial security services company, before ultimately winding up under the administrative agency of JP Morgan Chase in 2016. The patent has since been abandoned. Now let's talk about Red Kite, the company that he founded. As the name of Edge's patent would suggest, he reportedly founded Red Kite Financial Markets to equip financial institutions with the tools and knowledge to better monitor their trading activities. The company was purchased in 2012 by Nice Systems, where Edge continued to work until April of 2014. Now, using the money he earned from the sale of Red Kite, he started up a synergistic group of operating companies that span education, social impact, and revenue generation business models, with a focus on the digital economy and blockchain technologies. Very interesting way of describing that, especially because I thought all business models in theory are based on at least attempted revenue generation. But it felt necessary for him to include, I suppose. But one of these ventures that he started was called GovCoin Systems, which was later renamed to Disk Holdings. Now recall that Disk Holdings is a portfolio company of Broadhaven Ventures, which is also where, it turns out, Edge began working as an operating partner in April 2014, the same month that GovCoin launched. Now, as many folks watching this may already know, GovCoin is the term commonly used to describe central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. So, starting in May of 2016, true to its name, GovCoin carried out a trial with the UK government's Department for Work and Pensions, which saw 20 to 30 participants being paid their benefits through an app using distributed ledger technology. Apparently, it was controversial. People didn't necessarily enjoy the idea of having the government have such a direct look, direct insight, direct control, you might say, of how people spend their money. Now, in this infographic, which I got from GovCoin's archived website, GovCoin lays out their entire framework to, quote, transform the way governments distribute value. So I'm going to paraphrase each of the 5 steps here. 1, digital ID is the building block. In GovCoin's system, digital ID is a necessary inclusion, though it's unclear to me what the argument against currently existing physical forms of ID would be. Item number 2, tokenized digital currencies will replace cash. And not just physical money. GovCoin explicitly seeks to replace bearer bonds, or if I understand correctly, negotiable instruments, which is what cash is. So that would mean digital versions of the cash we have now. You know, the Canadian dollar that I have in my bank account is not a central bank digital currency, even though it is a digital representation of a dollar. It's all still, in theory, negotiable instruments, which their tokenized digital currencies would not be. Item number 3, smart devices will be used to scale up the system. Now, smart phones are one thing, right? You got a wallet on here. But what could the government possibly need to do with your smart fridge or your Tesla in the context of sending you your government benefit payments? Well, perhaps this answers it. Item number 4, housing, energy, and food will all be attached. So instead of providing you with benefit money with which to make your own decisions on how to spend or save, the system will put your home, your food, your energy into the hands of the government to manage. And lastly, number 5, global government and non-governmental organizations are the client. The system ignores international borders, erases the value of money, and provides a framework to establish and manage global governance. If you can afford to pay for it, of course. Now, this package of ventures spanning CBDCs, financial surveillance, and digital identity should not be surprising to readers or listeners at this point. In fact, DISC of DISC Holdings stands for Digital Identity Security Company. This screenshot that I found is from a September 2018 archive of one of DISC's several websites. Yet another mysterious and now non-existent part of John Edge's ledger, as the website has been vanished. And for those just listening, it's a picture of the Earth with 3 text blocks. How do we know that we can trust our digital counterparts? Is there a better way for someone to prove their digital identity rather than simply inputting credentials? And what technology can be used to tackle these problems? Well, I'm sure Disc Holdings has their answer locked and loaded. But needless to say, another one of these ventures that he started was ID 2020 itself. According to an article from Secure ID News, Edge was inspired to start ID 2020 in June 2014 after seeing a screening of a film called Meena, which recounts a true story about child sex trafficking in India. Now, I quote, "A panel of experts took questions afterwards, including Susan Bissell, Chief of Child Protection at international humanitarian group UNICEF. Susan articulated that one of the biggest problems in protecting children who are at risk of sexual violence is a lack of birth certificates or identity, Edge says. The film got his attention. He saw the identity issue as a technology problem and was immediately moved to put his background in business and financial services to work. He went home and sketched out a plan, offering details to Liu the next day over lunch. I'd recently sold my company and I was looking for a purpose, Edge says. So, ID 2020 was started on the 27th of June 2014, the day after I saw Mina. And indeed, 2020 was the year that Edge set as his deadline, quote, to create a system that would be technically and legally compliant for children regardless of nationality, origin, or status. Now, needless to say, the protection of children and the dismantling of child sex operations is something that I think we can all get behind. So perhaps this line of thinking is even correct. I'm not familiar enough with refugee humanitarian work. I don't know if this actually would address the underlying problem. If it does, then I'm on board. Fantastic. Color me skeptical though, because of everything else surrounding, because of all the other implications of universal digital identity. But I just want to note that. I'm not saying I'm against addressing these issues. For God's sake, no. But moving forward, in December 2014, Edge co-founded the Whitechapel think tank as a forum to build an understanding of the opportunities and challenges presented by distributed ledger technology, or blockchain, and consensus systems. Now, of course, this is another website that has been completely wiped from the internet. So, continuing the trend. Edge's co-founder was a guy named Jeremy Wilson, vice chairman of Barclays Corporate Banking. And at the time of Whitechapel's founding, Wilson was also serving as a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Advisory Council on Forests. He would go on to join the WEF's Global Futures Council on Blockchain in October 2016 and become an originating member of the Digital Pound Foundation, advocating for the introduction of a central bank digital currency to replace the British pound. Now, the Whitechapel think tank was cited in a January 2016 report by the UK government's chief science advisor titled Distributed Ledger Technology Beyond Blockchain. I quote, "The newly created Alan Turing Institute, working with groupings such as the Whitechapel think tank, could play an important role in coordinating and self-organizing the public and private research and development sector interested in this and related technologies. The private sector should consider investing in the Alan Turing Institute to support the pre-competitive research that will ultimately facilitate new commercial applications that are robust and secure." So it's saying Alan Turing Institute should work with Whitechapel think tank. Now, what's the Alan Turing Institute? Well, it appears to be focused on machine learning and AI, but notably, its partners and funders include the likes of Accenture, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Autistica, which is a organization advocating on behalf of autistic people, I believe, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Francis Crick Institute, GCHQ, which is an intelligence agency of the United Kingdom, Health Data Research UK, Imperial College London, MI5, which is another intelligence agency in the UK, Microsoft, the Ministry of Defense of the UK, Mozilla, the National Health Service, or the NHS, the Office of National Statistics, Public Health England, Public Health Scotland, Roche, TransUnion, and the United Nations Development Programme. Ah, yes, another robust public-private partnership. And it is with this group that the UK government suggested through their report that the Whitechapel think tank should work with. But this was a fun thing to stumble on. Who signed off on the report? None other than Matt Hancock, whose work in the UK government during the COVID-19 era has led to glorious condemnation. Most recently in the form of the previously discussed lockdown files, which never really went anywhere, did they? But you can't keep running into these people. It's nuts. Now, some pretty colorful squares on the screen. Though it wasn't set up until after ID 2020 was founded, John Edge and his team at ID 2020 happily, I'm sure, adjusted their official roadmap and timeline in response to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development upon the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals in September of 2015. Now, according to an archived version of John's personal website from April 2016, John Edge was, quote, focused on facilitating through public-private partnerships the creation of 1 billion legal identities with the ambition of saving the world $1 trillion a year in frictional costs in financial services. On a page titled Context, he elaborates on his motivations specifically. I quote, I am passionate and committed to forwarding the agenda for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My focus goals are Goal 1.4, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have appropriate new technology and financial services, including microfinance. And Goal 16.9, by 2030, provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. With this kind of commitment and the professional connections that John Edge had, I am no longer confused as to how this strange little startup would wind up launching at the United Nations, shoulder to shoulder with the largest corporations in the world. And that's what they did. ID 2020 goes big. So on May 19th, 2016, ID 2020 announced it had partnered up with the big club that we're not in. More specifically with PricewaterhouseCoopers as the lead sponsor of the landmark ID 2020 Summit to create technology-driven public-private partnerships to achieve the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goal of providing legal identity for everyone on the planet. The inaugural the inaugural ID 2020 Summit took place the very next day, May 20th, 2016, at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Among the event's participants were Accenture, Barclays, BlackRock, Cisco, Deloitte, the government of Estonia, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Google, IBM, Infosys, which, by the way, is a family venture of current UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, someone else that I've done a deep dive on before on Rounding the News, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, MIT Media Lab, also who had received funding from Jeffrey Epstein, I might add, NASDAQ, the Omidyar Network, and several dozen more, some of which are on the screen. Now, according to ID 2020's official press release following the event, some of the takeaways, which I've paraphrased here, were the following. Identity is a prerequisite of the Sustainable Development Goals. Item number 2, the private sector has expertise and technology that could significantly accelerate access to digital identity. 3, a public-private partnership is needed in order to coordinate efforts to implement the technology in ways that are appropriate, secure, and sustainable. And finally, sweeping commitments from conference attendees to contribute towards the shared goal of universal digital identity were received. The second annual summit took place in June 2017, once again at the United Nations headquarters. I quote, "This year's gathering, entitled Platform for Change, launched the ID 2020 Alliance, a consortium of public and private organizations committed to improving lives through digital identity. Accenture, a founding member, announced a $1 million investment in the ID 2020 Alliance, marking a key turning point in the effort to make secure digital identity for all a reality by 2030. But perhaps the most important takeaway from the 2017 summit was this: for digital identity to meet the needs of governments, international organizations, businesses, and individuals alike, interoperability is absolutely crucial. Dr. Pramod Varma, the chief architect of Aadhaar, which, quick sidebar, I believe is the national digital identity system in India. Aadhaar demonstrated how taking a platform approach based on open standards and an open API facilitates vendor neutrality, encourages continued innovation, and allows an ecosystem to develop around the technical platform. Now, this, of course, is exactly what happened through the widespread adoption of the Smart Health Framework, as explored in detail in my previous piece, called In the Name of Excelsior. Also at this summit, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, was highlighted as the model on which the ID 2020 system would be built. This would come to manifest in more ways than one in just a few short years, as I'm sure you can imagine. Now, the founding partners of the alliance were Accenture, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Microsoft, the Rockefeller Foundation, and IDO.org. But others would include the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Biometrics Institute, Harvard University, Hyperledger, IBM, iRespond, MasterCard, the New America Foundation, Open Society Foundations, Reuters. Why all these news organizations? The Sovereign Foundation. Yes, they're back. Standard Chartered Bank, Thomson Reuters, the Unique Identity Authority of India, the United States Department of the Treasury, a variety of United Nations agencies, as well as the United States Agency for International Development, the World Economic Forum, and the World Food Program. Moving on to the third summit, which took place on September 14th, 2018, with a specific focus on defining what is a good digital identity. Now, 2 pilot programs were announced at the event. The first, led by iRecover, is it iRecover? Hold on. I don't know if it's iRecover. I might be misstating this. It's not iRecover, but I can't remember what it is. It's I something. But the other partner was the International Rescue Committee. Involved deploying blockchain-based digital identification linked to individual users through iris recognition for refugees accessing the International Rescue Committee's services in the My La camp in Thailand. As described in the Associated Press release, if I can get it to pull up, initially these digital identities will enable the recipients to access improved, consistent healthcare within the camp through an accurate and secure electronic medical record. In the future, the same system may electronically document both educational attainment and professional skills to aid with employment opportunities. Now, let me just do a quick sidebar and say, you notice how LinkedIn is now all about these micro credentials? LinkedIn and social media as a whole is basically a version of this, right? A social media profile is in its own way, a digital identity. But I'm just realizing now, if you look around, think about how many places are now offering these micro-credential programs and what they then manifest as, how they attach to your profiles. I just struggle to keep one thought connected to the other in terms of like the way that they take the premise of what these programs are supposed to be for and then add everything else, but in ways that the only possible use for it would be to centralize everything under a single digital identity platform, which I just don't understand why. I just don't understand how that premise has just been accepted. Anyway, like why it makes sense. The second program, led by cryptocurrency company Everest and the government of Indonesia, involved the quote, transfer of liquid propane gas subsidies by delivering them to a biometrically validated digital wallet over a transparent and low cost blockchain. In other words, carbon credits as a cryptocurrency. Now, not long after the summit, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, announced a program with Simprints and NEC to, quote, use biometrics to increase immunization coverage in developing countries. We've heard something just like this before now, haven't we? The program aimed to begin testing of this system in early 2020 in Bangladesh and Tanzania, and if successful, would progress to linking children's digital identities with their vaccination records. Okay, great. So then, the fourth ID 2020 summit took place on September 19, 2019, with a renewed focus on the so-called Good ID Challenge. At the event, the Alliance announced a new initiative with Gavi and the government of Bangladesh to, quote, leverage immunization as an opportunity to establish digital identity. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the core premise behind this entire 4-part series. That vaccine passports, as we've lived them, were specifically introduced to leverage immunization as an opportunity to establish digital identity. I could end the video right now, but I won't. Now, this was in addition to the prior announcement from June, and it seems as though this is a continuation of that same program, this time bringing ID 2020 on board. Now, in discussing the program, Anir Chowdhury, head of Bangladesh's Access to Information program, was quoted in Biometric Update as saying, the government of Bangladesh recognizes that the design of digital identity systems carries far-reaching implications for individuals' access to services and livelihoods, and we are eager to pioneer this approach. How nice of Mr. Chowdhury to have that kind of foresight, but perhaps that was the idea. Recall, I am but one of millions of Canadians alone who, because we did not have this digital proof of vaccination to show, well, let's just say there were far-reaching implications for our access to services and livelihoods. Now, Seth Berkley, who's the CEO of Gavi, said that he was, quote, enthusiastic about the potential impact of this program, not just in Bangladesh, but as something we can replicate across Gavi-eligible countries. In other words, poor, low-income developing countries, providing a viable route to closing the identity gap. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the year of all years, 2020. So rather than having their usual in-person summit, ID 2020 decided to go online in response to the declared COVID-19 pandemic. Look, needless to say, 2020 was a significant year for the initiative, given that its entire premise was to prepare for global digital identification by the decade's turning. And here they were, ready to go. There were 4 webinars held in October and November 2020. They were titled Good Digital ID for All, How Do We Get There? The second one was titled Digital Immunization Certificates, Designing for a New Era in Global Health. The third session was Reaching the Last 30%, Digital ID for Financial Inclusion, and more. And finally, Laying the Foundation, Digital ID for the Next Generation. There you have it. Digital immunization certificates and digital ID in the same breath once again. But of course, as we well know, ID 2020 is years behind many of its own member companies like IBM and MasterCard in their development of vaccine passport technologies, which potentially poses a problem for their goal of interoperability. But not to worry. They thought of that too. On February 9th, 2021, ID 2020 launched the Good Health Pass Collaborative to encourage interoperability between the COVID-19 health credentialing solutions being developed by numerous organizations. Members of the collaborative included Accenture, Amadeus IT Group, which, if you recall, is that airline booking company that signed on with IBM's Health Pass, which made the Excelsior Pass integrated with all of these international flight systems. You have Can Immunize. You have the Commons Project, which was the World Economic Forum-led initiative closely associated with the smart health cards infrastructure. You have the COVID-19 Credentials Initiative. Down, the company behind Verifly, partnered with New York's Excelsior Pass. Deloitte, Hyperledger, MasterCard, IBM, Salesforce, the Sovereign Foundation once again, and TrustStamp, which, remember, is partnered with MasterCard's Wellness Pass for COVID-19. On August 1st, 2021, the collaborative published an interoperability blueprint for developing and deploying a Good Health Pass. The document describes compatibility requirements for other vaccine passport ecosystems and protocols, including those developed by the Airports Council International, the Karen Alliance, Collaborative Arrangement for the Prevention and Management of Public Health Events in Civil Aviation, or CAPSA. CAPSA. Little bit of phlegm in there. They reference a document, Digital Documentation of COVID-19 Certificates by the World Health Organization, the Digital Infrastructure for Verifiable Open Credentialing, or DIVOC protocol. Of course, the EU Digital COVID Certificate, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the Vaccination Credential Initiative, or VCI. And with this blueprint, the various COVID-19 vaccine passports from around the world, made by different developers within different consortiums of various kinds, are now even further interlinked. Recall that the VCI is the public-private partnership behind the rollout of the smart health cards for use in the COVID era. And then you have the Karen Alliance, which stands for the Creating Access to Real-Time Information Now Through Consumer Directed Exchange Alliance. It is partnered with Apple, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Federal Trade Commission, the aforementioned FIDO Alliance, Google, Microsoft, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, and in case you thought we'd go a whole episode without saying it, they were also brought to you by Pfizer. Furthermore, on March 22nd, 2023, the Alliance released a report in partnership with the United States Department of Health and Human Services, which, as they described, lays the foundation for how individuals can voluntarily digital identity proof themselves once, which I think is yet another typo, and used that same digital credential with multiple data holders of their health information. Finally, just to add insult to injury, in April 2023, the MasterCard Community Pass was certified by ID 2020 as a good digital ID. Now, as a final note, I want to re-emphasize the degree to which the vaccine passport phenomenon is not one that began with COVID-19, in case that is not unimpeachable at this point. But particularly in light of the European Commission and the World Health Organization's declaration that they will now take the EU digital COVID certificate global. There's this infographic that I had seen probably a year and a half ago that suggested that the European Union was, as early as like 2018, planning to roll out a vaccine passport. And when I saw this, you have to understand, this was back before that vaccine passports were really not a conspiracy theory anymore. But just keep in mind, when we look at John Edge, when we look at GovCoin, the Disk Holdings Group or whatever, and the pilot they ran, for example, with the UK government, not so hard to believe, which not that we even have to try to, try too hard to This is the roadmap for the implementation of actions by the European Commission based on the Commission communication and the Council recommendation on strengthening cooperation against vaccine-preventable diseases. So, ladies and gentlemen, they weren't simply, over the course of however many years, working on a digital ID. They were also specifically spending government time and resources developing vaccine passports. Now, just as a quick summary of what this shows, the timeline provided, 2018, they were completing public comments on trying to ascertain through surveys and such what European citizens' attitudes towards vaccines were. In 2019, they began a feasibility study for the development of a common EU vaccination card, which by the time this version of the document was published, which was in August 2022, had been completed and the publication was pending. But you see that trial, that feasibility study, stretched from 2019 through 2021. Now, I saw this back in 2021, so there was no way of predicting whether what followed in 2022 would in fact occur. But in the 2022 column, the European Commission had said that so there would be a Commission proposal for a common vaccination card / passport for EU citizens. And it had been considered delivered in the format of Commission proposal for regulation on the European health data space. So, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to end my investigation, my little series here into digital ID and vaccine passports. There's a whole bunch of other organizations and people and just plot threads that are very relevant. My friend Pierre, who goes by OpenVate, he had suggested one that I didn't have a chance to dive into fully, but I think it's less about trying to understand each and every single branch, because once you've demonstrated, as I believe I have, that the entire premise of the vaccine passports as we've understood them and these moves towards full digitization of various other aspects of our lives, once you've demonstrated that these are intended to be put together into one so-called decentralized digital identity, um, it starts to, I think, allow a more accurate context in which people, you and I, the people around us who maybe for the first time are starting to consider the implications of what I've just described. It gives a better context in which to make decisions for one's own health, to decide whether we as individuals truly believe that these giant corporations and governments and supranational non-governmental organizations are really groups that have a good track record or have any reason at all, have given us any reason at all to trust that this is a good idea. But look, the title of this episode is not simply a nod to that early article of identity being yours and yours alone. No, in fact, it's an affirmation. It's a declaration. I declare my identity is my own. I don't mean some card or some digital thing on here. That's not my identity. I'm Liam Sturgess. I don't think I say that to myself enough. But I'm Liam Sturgess. You are you. And none of that can be given or taken away. Except maybe by God. But I don't need a government to tell me who I am, basically. That's a kind of a simple way to end. But I intentionally chose a positive affirmation for the conclusion of what is otherwise a very stressful set of things to consider. But I'm gonna now go and have a walk with my friend Patricia, who I haven't seen in a number of years, and it's a beautiful sunny day. And when considering what song I wanted to play for you guys on the way out, to be frank, the one that I wanted to, I wasn't able to get loaded up. But there is a common thread between what we've talked about today and, well, at least what I've just talked about, the sun out there, and the music video I'm going to play for you. It's called Tuesday Afternoon. It takes place in a nice sunny day. The very same kind I'm about to enjoy, and the same kind that I hope you go and enjoy. Because in this discussion about digital everything, I think we do spend a lot of time at the computer. I know I do. And I think it's time we all go outside. But before I play this video, I just want to once again say, if you have enjoyed this, if you enjoy the fact and support the fact that I am independent, that I have no strings attached to me, and that I am attempting to be a role model for your average citizen who can learn and who can explore ideas through these micro journeys that perhaps I haven't considered before, or perhaps aren't my area of expertise as laid out on a paper hung on my wall. The best way to make sure I can continue doing that is to become a paid subscriber to my Substack, liamsturgess.substack.com, where starting next week, I'm going to be adjusting my format a little bit to create content that is exclusive to paid supporters. And that will improve the overall quality of what I do. And it will also allow me to continue making even more free stuff, by the way. So I have no intention of putting the entirety of my work behind a paywall, but there are specific benefits in addition to just supporting me and making sure I can keep doing this and keep eating. You can also gain some exclusive access. But last but not least, another way to support is to go to liamsturgess.locals.com, where I'm about to go do a quick half-hour post-show, and I highly recommend you join me over there. And if you like, that is another place you can go sign up to be a paid supporter, which will also very shortly, starting next week, deliver exclusive premium benefits for those who are paid. But even the free members, you can become part of a growing community of people like myself who enjoy going on these micro journeys. So in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you over there in about, let's say, 10 minutes at see, that is an old reflex of mine. And I do recommend you go to roundingtheearth.locals.com because Matthew and Gabe continue to make some awesome stuff, and the community still thrives despite my no longer making videos over there. But also liamsturgess.locals.com. Funny how Freudian slips come out. So we will see you there. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this song, a music video I made out in the sunny West Vancouver nature a couple of years ago. I hope you enjoy.
broken boy left in the dark, falling for a spark. Call me brave or call me vile, bet I can make you smile if you stay a while. I'm so afraid to try too hard, I'll miss the mark and watch you go. And run away from what's in store, what could have been, what is no more. Whoa, whoa. I'll call you Tuesday afternoon, if you're out I'll see you soon. I'm going crazy in my mind, but outside I'm out of time. If I get the chance to choose, I think I might just fall for you. Check my phone from time to time, looking for a sign. Call me out or call me blind, but don't say it's a crime if we walk the line. I've heard what everybody says, that you're better on your own. But when I knelt to kiss your head, you looked at me and you said no. My lips are home. I'll call you Tuesday afternoon, if you're out I'll see you soon. I'm going crazy in my mind, but outside I'm out of time. If I get the chance to choose, I think I might just fall for you. If you're out, I'll see you soon. I'm going crazy in my mind,